Come on, Peter Gunn. Peter Gunn stopped by earlier. Actually, I don't know if you can hear my stereo. It's not my stereo, it's the computer. You know what? I don't even know why you brought it up. Also, I haven't. Go ahead and keep warming up the crowd while I do this. All right, shut up now. 2, 3, 4. Do do boo 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 boo. Do 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 who. Do 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 do. That's me. It's Wednesday. Picks up a week. So kind of a light week, although Granddad is in a spending mood. I got my tax return today. And to think at 2 a.m. this morning, I was gambling on buying a bag of Cool Ranch Doritos from my local 7-Eleven. And now here I am flush with comics. I mean, I am able to pay a few bills, get me out of a couple jams, which is no sweat there. But I was also able to get some extra funny books this week. So let's have a look, shall we? First up, this is one I was going to get anyway. This is X-Corp #1. This is yet another X book in the X book pantheon that Marvel has been doing. Oh, geez. Powers of X is 2019, fall of 2019, I want to say. So, yeah, we're coming up on a year and a half of Hickman-helmed X books. And I'm not, like, as usual, I haven't read a whole lot, but you got Warren Worthington III, better known as the Angel, and then you also have Monet, or better known as M. And Warren is rich, you can tell, because he has the third in his name. And Monet is also filthy rich because her father is Dr. Nefaria, I believe, who is one of those villains who's also like a count or a baron or something. Dr. Nefaria. I think he's also a baron. I don't know. But she's loaded. So this is going to be not unlike how you have Way of X, which is Nightcrawler and his religious awakening around the new society of Krakoa. This is the more business end of it. So I'm looking forward to this. And aesthetically, it definitely has Hickman's fingerprints all over it, even though he's not writing it or drawing it, to my knowledge. And I don't even know how direct his influence, because this kind of aesthetic is very Hickman-esque, going back to his days on the Nightly News, which was when I was in college, I want to say. So 05, 06, somewhere around there, maybe 07. And I'm looking forward. And it's Teenie Howard, too, who I've really been enjoying her work lately. So that is a good acquisition. Also, from the Marvel Comics group this week, they're continuing with the Heroes Reborn, what I would consider an event, possibly even a mini event. So what you have, especially as far as Marvel goes, DC might kind of structure their stuff differently. Marvel and DC do the same crap, but they put different names to it. But you have a big crossover event would be like King in Black, or what was the one from last year? Empire, which affects, events in those books affect everyone in the Marvel Universe and so on. And then you have events which might cross over into a couple different books, but are usually and they're usually within, like a Heroes Reborn one is more of an Avengers mini event, I would call it, or an event. You might even go, I don't know. Yeah, I would say it's an event. I'll put it that way. So, as the second issue came out this week, what I was going to show you here is with these events and these crossovers, they take an opportunity to publish more books than they really need to. And you hear a lot of people, especially comic shop owners, complaining because they don't know how much it's going to sell. And every owner I've talked to in the last few years about this topic is also grousing about how Marvel and DC have just been flooding the market, which is, again, nothing new. These guys have been owning it. If they've owned a comic shop after 1990, I don't know why anyone would need to tell them this is how it works. But it's how it works is, Marvel's like, hey, Jim and the thousands, if not millions of other dorks like him in the world are going to buy anything we put our names on. So let's do it. And when owners are like, you put out so much crap. This was actually something I read about not too long ago. There's a guy who's kind of like, there is a loose amalgamation. It might be a real guild or not a union, but like an association of comic shop owners. And the head of that association a couple years ago delivered a keynote address at some convention or some expo, and essentially flat out told Marvel and DC to just stop publishing so many books. And DC and Marvel, I mean, one or the other of them actually kind of listened. I think it was Marvel who was like, all right, and they, especially because of the quarantine, they were like, yeah, obviously, let's just cut back, and then slowly. But I think both companies were wizened because back, and they should. That I mean, I can definitely see both sides of it. Back in the '90s, when I was a kid, and in the early '90s, and there was a huge boom in comics and comic book collecting. So there was a million publishers sprung up overnight, and a ton of like first editions and hologram covers and die cut covers and all these gimmicky things. Number one issue collector's item and all that sort of crap. And then by the mid '90s, the bubble broke, and by the late '90s, Marvel went bankrupt. So it's that thing where there'll be just a glut. And I mean, to this day, like when I used to work in a shop, and I can't imagine it's much different now, all these people who had bought comics by the hundreds in the '90s, counting on them being an investment, would come into the shop that I worked at 20, 25, 30 years later. Hey, I got all these books. And we go, great. Do you need new insulation in your house? These are worthless now. I know you spent hundreds, if not thousands of dollars on them. And I'm sure they brought you hours and hours of priceless reading fun, but they are not worth anything more than that. So this is all to say that this feels like a smaller thing, and I'm still on board with it. I feel as long as the quality is high, and the quality of these books is high, I think a lot of shop owners don't care for mainstream comics. That's fine. But, I mean, I'm buying them, so I got no complaints. So the Heroes Reborn event is sort of an alternate timeline where the Avengers never existed, and Tony Stark is still a drunk, and Captain Marvel is not a captain, or Carol Danvers never got above like Colonel or something like that. Robbie Reyes never became the Ghost Rider. The only person who knows what's going on anymore is Blade. So like, it's a really fun series. But what I also do like is, and they did this with House of M too, where it was another very similar thing, where it was an alternate timeline or an alternate universe that the Scarlet Witch actually made, and this was very influential in the WandaVision show. Scarlet Witch made this world where mutants were the upper class, were the ruling class, and humans were not. Humans were slave class. I don't know if slave is that, but you know what I'm saying. It was very, House of M was Magneto. Magneto became ruler of the world essentially, and there was all these side things. It was like, well, what happened to Peter Parker? Like in this world, Peter Parker doesn't become Spider-Man. He just becomes a photographer for the Daily Bugle. And in this one, you got Hyperion and the Imperial Guard, who are essentially this world's Avengers. But they work directly for President Phil Coulson. Phil Coulson, if you remember from the movies and TV show, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., played by Clark Gregg, very likable character. In the comics, Jason Aaron has made him into real government type. He's become very much... who was that? There was a character back in the old S.H.I.E.L.D. days, Jasper Sitwell. Agent Sitwell eventually became the company man. He was the government liaison, and a real dick about it. So Phil Coulson kind of has become that in the Avengers, and now in this book he's the president of the United States, and he uses the Hyperion and the rest of the Squadron Supreme as like his own personal guard dogs, watchdogs, attack dogs, if you will. No offense to any dogs watching. So I like when they go into the deeper into the side, because it's fun just to read, the surface stuff, or the core books is all you really need. But I like to go kind of down these side streets. Another thing about these is that they usually give them to kind of unknown. So I don't recognize any of these names. I mean, John Byrne's name's on it. Plus, there's a tale of the Starjammers. That's why I got him. They got John Byrne back for a Starjammers story, though. I had better not be, because that is what doctors call a cock tease. Let me see here. Without blowing it for myself. Yeah, I'll be goddamn. Oh, okay. Artist Stephen Byrne. So I don't know if they're related to John Byrne, but hats off. That would have... But this has Ron Lim's name on the cover, so if they're bringing him back for stuff, then I am also on board for that. Again, trying not to blow anything for myself. Well, I guess I'll just tell you about it next week. But it can be a fun one. I mean, sometimes the stories are forgettable, to be honest with you. Hence my rant about quality in these crossovers. But sometimes you can find some guy, it was in the pages of a book like this that I first read Al Ewing in the Marvel Universe. Al Ewing had written, what was that book? It wasn't very good. Garth Ennis had a book on Dynamite called Jenny something or other. Jenny Jones. I'm in love with Jenny Jones. Well, some Jennifer Blood. And it was about a lady who was a housewife, but also a mafia assassin. And it was very Garth Ennis, and it wasn't terrible, but it wasn't. I was mostly buying it because of Ennis. And then once he left and they let Al Ewing take over, I read a couple issues and I was like, this book just ain't good enough. But I didn't, and there was a little bit of like, oh, I don't think Al Ewing is very good, but yeah, I was definitely wrong. It was just a bad book. When he started writing for Marvel was when he really came into his own. Now he's a huge, one of the biggest writers they have. So the next Al Ewing might be in one of these. There is another. This isn't the same thing, but like I don't really much care for Robert Kirkman's work, and he's most famously well known for being co-creator of The Walking Dead. And at the time, I just never got into. I couldn't get into Walking Dead. I read the first few trades, and I was just like, I don't know. I like zombie stuff, but certainly at the time, I was burnt out. And even then, though, it wasn't. It felt very kind of derivative, which I generally like things that are derivative. So if I'm calling something derivative, I'm not just being a wise guy. But there are books like this that Kirkman would write backup stories for or something like that. And I'd be like, well, these are way more fun. Okay, and then Thief of Thieves comes out, and I was like, all right. Here are two Squarebound books I bought this week that I am the most excited for. I don't know if I'll be able to have time to read these before next week, but I will talk about them. First up, Poison Flowers and Pandemonium by the late, great Richard Sala. Richard Sala is a comic book artist in the underground, or I guess they called it more the alternative scene in the 80s and 90s. He might be most well known because some of his work was turned into animated shorts on Liquid Television on MTV in the early 90s. He did a book called Evil Eye, though, throughout the 90s. It was good. And honestly, just anytime I would see his art, which when I was in high school was kind of easier to find because it wasn't superhero stuff. So I would find it cheap in like cutout bins because comic shops didn't know what they had. These are 4 all-new stories, apparently. Richard Sala, unfortunately, died just about a year ago, in fact. It was the same week that Little Richard died. I remember that. So, yeah, about a year ago. And so when I walked in the shop and I saw this on display, oh, holy shoot. Holy shoot is what I said. $30 price point, not super thick, but a really nice hardcover. And it's Richard Sala, who I didn't think I was going to get to. He died really young, too. And he wasn't famous enough to really there wasn't a lot of news out there about it, so I'm not even sure what it was. It might have been The Cove, but also comic book creators do not take care of themselves, nor do the publishers take care of them. They don't have medical. I mean, Mantlo might still be on life support for all I know. So I'm super excited for that. I'm also super excited for this. I may have mentioned that this is Monsters by the incredible genius Barry Windsor Smith. Barry Windsor Smith is a British comic book artist who made his mark I'm pretty sure he's British anyway. Made his mark in the 70s in the pages of Conan the Barbarian, as written by Roy Thomas and published by the Marvel Comics Group. He also did in the 90s. He was part of the original Valiant crew, and he did Archer and Armstrong, and I want to say he did Magnus Robot Fighter, at least a few covers. He for sure did Magnus Robot Fighter versus Predator. And what else was he doing around that time? I want to say he was doing, there's something else that I know him for, but Barry Windsor Smith's Conan is some of the greatest 70s, certainly some of the greatest Bronze Age comics, and also a direct influence on Cerebus the Aardvark, which was one of my favorite books as well. Now this, I again don't know much about this. It's a $40 book, but look at the size of this sumbitch. It is like kind of over, it's like, I just want to eat this right now. I want it inside of me. I'm seeing somebody, though. Let's not get crazy. I've had quite a week, I'll tell you. Tax return today. And just the federal, I still got the say coming. I don't want to. Started seeing a new lady, got a new job that pays obscenely, so I even ordered some comics from Lone Star today. Granddad's having a week. All right, so I don't know anything about this, but from what I've heard, and I know Ed Piscor just recently did an episode of his web series about this book. But Jesus, just looking at this, it's the Library Journal calls it his magnum opus, and I have no reason to doubt it. I cannot wait to get to this. Barry Windsor-Smith has been one of my favorite artists since I was a kid. Fun fact, my friend Paul, who was in his early 20s when I was in my teens, liked Barry Smith, so I also liked him. But I really did come to appreciate his art. I call him Barry most of the time. Oh, Barry's got a new book out. That's how much I enjoy it. We're on first name basis. So, man, I may not be able to get to that before next week, but you better believe I'm going to try. And that picks up how we... I mentioned I got monsters. It picks up last week. Oh, man. We got to fire that composer. That was disgusting. Last week was a pretty good haul. I haven't really gotten into... I'm still like 2 weeks behind, I think. But I'm hopefully going to be able to get to some of the more of these today. So first up, we have Heroes Reborn #1, which I was just talking about, so I don't really need to go into it again. But yeah, this is exactly what I wanted. It's really just stories like this. It's really just a matter of taking the toys in your toy box and then just putting them or taking them out of somebody else's. You know what I mean? It's just putting new costumes on your toys, and it's fun. I've really come. I mean, I'm not a genius for saying this. I'm a genius for a lot of other reasons, but I've really come around on. I like things that are derivative. I like things that are the same but different. I'm very much into other things like Barry Smith and Richard Sala, but I really like superheroes, and I really like the formula, and I really like and to me, I mean, I know to the outside or to the untrained eye, it just seems like the same old capes punching each other, which first of all, what's wrong with that? And second of all, there's so many tiny little variations and things that you can do that to me, it's an infinitely different and interesting. Heroes Reborn is different from House of M, which is different from Age of Apocalypse, which is different from Days of Future Past, which is different from any of the millions at this point, alternate timelines. I mean, the Marvel Universe, the multiverse is huge. Fun fact, the denotation Marvel, or the Marvel continuity that's considered like the mainstream, the main Marvel books, that's Earth 616. And Alan Moore is the one who came up with that number, that concept, because DC always would do Earth 1, Earth 2, Earth 3. And so Alan Moore was like, well, Marvel is has like a much more myriad of, because DC would destroy all the alternate universes every now and again. So he was like, well, we're going to start at 616. So there's thousands of alternate timelines. And if you go to the Marvel fandom app, they can list them all out for you. And I cannot get enough. Feeling good. Nobody tell my ex-wife's attorney. So this was good. Thank you. Also, last week, Marjorie Finnegan, Temporal Criminal #1. This was a lot of fun. This is nothing like Ennis does this. And I think I've mentioned this before. Whenever there's a new book now, the creator, the writer, or the artist, or both, will write a little write-up in the back just talking about how the book came to be. And in this one, he's just like, I came up with a name, and then I was just like, oh, what else? It sounds good. And then he just kind of went from there. So this is nothing groundbreaking that either of these guys are doing, but I don't mean to damn it with faint praise. It's a lot of fun. It's a real fun time travel crime story. I mean, the title says it all. She's a temporal criminal. This book, The Good Asian #1, this is very, very good. This is very good, hard-boiled detective fiction set in the Depression era in San Francisco, California. And the main character is, in fact, an Asian American. Now, I didn't recognize any of the creative team, I don't think. But the art is really good. Okay, so, yes, the writer is Pornsak Pichetshote. And at first, I was like, oh, this guy used to be the editor-in-chief for Vertigo. But I think that's a different Pornsak. I didn't realize it was such a common name. But the art is incredible. Lee Lowridge, the colorist, I did know that name, but yeah, the art is really good and the story is so good. I mean, I don't know if I mean, I'm sure I've gone on a tangent like this before. There's always lately, especially in comics, there's been a real push towards more representation, you know, not just straight white people. And there's a lot of pushback on that, usually from straight white people. Myself personally, and I think I've said as much before, I'm super for it. Not for just white liberal guilt reasons. Those are definitely present, don't get me wrong. I definitely wake up every day going, all right, I'm sorry, hi. And I go to bed saying the same thing. And I'm honestly fine with that. I don't really, I mean, I still get tons of white privilege, so it's not like I'm being put out any. But what I really, really like, and I feel like I say this a lot, like I'm almost defending myself, like anybody gives a crap, but the reason I'm into it is because it's only good for the art form. Comics are the greatest art form of all time. And I say that, I mean, obviously, I'm much more into low art than into high. But out of everything, movies, TV, books, records, comics are the ultimate art form. They're the best. It's just words and pictures, and they can tell all kinds of stories, from the most fantastical to the most realistic. And it's a thing, you love to see it, is my point. But the only way that really, or not the only way, but I guess if we really want that art form and that very simple method of storytelling, words and pictures, to achieve its greatest, not to sound too grandiose, everyone needs to be on board. It can't just be guys who look like me making these comics and then buying these comics. There needs to be more people in. It's guys who look like me make comics about guys who look like me, and then guys who look like me buy them. That's fun for guys like me. I'm not going to, lie to you, but it's very narrow, and eventually I would just go, well, what's on TV? But if we can get all different perspectives and all different kinds of people, like, oh my gosh, look at all this stuff. And a story like this, I never would have thought of in a million years. And I love hard-boiled and detective fiction. That, but I mean, I would never be able to write something like it, certainly, but I wouldn't even think of it, You have this, our hero here, the detective, he's, these guys are very, mindful of being historically accurate. And since there were no Asian American detectives on any police force in any major city on the continental U.S., but in Hawaii there were. So this guy is a detective. He's from Hawaii, but the story takes place he's got a badge, but it says Honolulu Police Department on it. So he's working in San Francisco on a kind of a private case. And so there's obviously a lot of stuff about Asian culture and about being Chinese in America, especially in the mid-30s when the Chinese Exclusion Act was a very real thing. I'm sure you slept through that part of high school history. So, but he was also adopted by a white family when he was a child. So he has, he's being torn between his native culture and his adopted culture. I mean, you can't have a hard-boiled detective without that kind of inner conflict. And I certainly wouldn't have been able to, I don't think I would have thought of it. And even if I had, I wouldn't be able to execute it. I don't believe. Because I'm not an Asian person. I don't know if I've made that clear. So yeah, people have been asking me for recommendations lately. I don't know why, probably because they can all go outside again. And this is one I've definitely been throwing out there. And just look at that Dave Johnson cover on top of that. I'll buy anything with Dave Johnson cover. That was picked up, Bobby Baba. All right. I'm going to go. I have to get some work done, but then I want to read some of these comics. And I spent 25 minutes on this one, but I don't regret it this time for a change. Yeah, I'll leave that up to you guys. Okay, bye.